It was not. So I want to make sure and remind you that we have self-paced e-learning available to anyone in the state. So it doesn't have to be an EL teacher, it can be any educator. You can do these as a group, you can do them individually. It's self-paced. They come with check-in modules. And so I want to remind you that those are available and it's easy to get signed up to participate in those. There are some new ones added and a few changes for this year. And there's a flyer that explains more about each one at the top of the slide there. Okay, I have a quote for today. This one comes from a past NEA president. It said, all educators must become fighters for what they and their students need to be successful. And that's kind of where we are right now and leads us into advocacy that we're going to talk about for a little bit. So to start talking about advocacy, we have to talk about why there's a need for it. And in our nation, our ELs we know are a growing demographic, and it has been traditionally disproportionately underserved in our public school system. And we don't put the money or the effort into them as we should since this population has increased. In just 2 decades, the EL enrollment has grown over 57%, and that's true even in our state. English learners make up about 10% of the total population in our schools in the United States, and over 2/3 of those were born right here in the United States. And on the right is a count of our Missouri English learners from 2010 to last year. And you can see that it has more than doubled in our state as well. And then this is from our most recent access test in 2025. We tested 44,365 students on the regular access. So we've grown over almost 3,500 students in just a year's time. So we're still increasing. And then on the right is the breakdown by grade level to give you an idea where our numbers are the largest and who we're serving. And then I took the overall reports for each grade level and averaged them to find what our average proficiency levels are. And most of our students are consistently at a level 3 of proficiency or below, but with the majority of them being at a level 3. I've also looked at our alternate access. We tested 329 students on the alternate access, and this gives you a breakdown by grade level, the numbers. And the proficiency level was at the lowest level. The majority of them were at that lowest level, with this level 3 coming up close behind. So 3 and below is where most of them are in the alternate access as well. So that being said, and I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the misperceptions about English language development. And one of the most common is that it seems that others feel that anyone who speaks English can be an English language teacher. Another myth is that it's simply a remedial activity and not a core academic subject. Even No Child Left Behind, it didn't include ELD as one of the core academic subject areas defined by law, which kind of set us back as well. And when we look at English language development across all of the states, it's different from state to state. The requirements are different from state to state. That also doesn't help us with that continuity and clout that we need. And these things, as I say here, have undermined our status of the field and some of the programs that we serve. So having it at the national level was intended to make things consistent across the states, and we still yet struggle to do that. So we also know that support for English language development comes from a couple of sources. Title III of ESSA or ESEA, um, which serves both elementary and secondary education. Funding also comes for English learners through Title II of the Workforce Investment Act, which deals with adult education. And even though our numbers are growing, as I said, almost doubled, which we are not getting proportionately more money to fund our programs. And with recent events, there have been even more cuts. So we have to find ways to advocate for change. So the reality is that many of our educators are underprepared to meet the needs of our students and don't know enough about the culture of our students to work with these diverse groups. Our current school resources are inadequate. Many students tend to be enrolled in weak program models or tested and then put in a classroom without very much support at all. The program support varies from school to school, district to district. The growing number of ELs are becoming long-term English learners and not progressing and continue to struggle because our programs are often not strong enough to meet their needs. We don't have the manpower, we don't have the resources that we need. And their lack of proficiency or difficulty with academic language is sometimes mistakenly taken to mean that they need an easier program. So the curriculum gets watered down for them, which is not what it's intended to do. So we have to start advocating. Missouri both has a mix of high density districts, high growth districts, and hybrids with a little bit of both. Because of this differing representation across our state, we can't have a single method of advocacy for our students. In areas where where they're brand new to English learners, they might not have the resources or the training to work with them. And in our higher density areas that have seen a lot of growth, they struggle to find enough teachers and classrooms to support the needs. So there are different needs in different areas. So the advocacy looks different for those different schools. We also have differing populations of English learners. We have those with disabilities, those who are SLIFE, migrants, refugees, some that are gifted, those who are recently arrived, those that are long-term, and they all come with different needs. And even though most of them are Hispanic, there is a lot of diversity in the races and ethnic orientation of our students. So we have to take all of those things into consideration when we're talking about them and bringing their needs to others. So here's some steps that we can take towards advocacy. First of all, we have to isolate what is the issue in our school, in our community that we need to address. Second, we identify our allies who can work with us, who is willing to listen. And when we present our views, we need to be willing to listen to their views as well, so that we can be aware of what the other viewpoint is and how we can address it. The third thing, and probably one of the most important, is being clear on the rights of English learners, having a clear understanding of policies and laws. And I'm going to share some resources at the end here before we leave that you can use to do that. Make sure that the rights of English learners are encased in those laws and that we bring those to the forefront. And then organize and educate others about those laws and policies so that they're aware of what needs to be done and what the law says, even if some of our documents have been taken away. And then the last one here is identify your outlets for change. What can you do in your classroom, your school, your district, your community, and outside of your community? Who can you contact and who can you partner with to further the cause? Knowing your circle of influence. So those are some steps for advocacy. And And I'm going to come back to this a little bit when we talk about the next part on having us people to work with you. But we're going to turn it over now to Rhonda to talk a little bit about trauma-informed students, because those are students we need to advocate for as well. Okay. So Rhonda, I'm going to go ahead and forward the slides for you if that's okay.
Okay. So do you want to handle the clicking, or
I'll do the
can I do that?
clicking. I don't know if you
Okay.
can or not.
I don't know.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Just tell.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here for this really important topic. I feel like talking about trauma-informed practices right after talking about Cammie's topic of advocacy is very timely because it definitely raises my cortisol as we're talking about things being rescinded and such. So I am Rhonda Hittenberger Ortiz, and I am based in Springfield at MSU, working with the 94 districts in the Southwest region. So just for some background, I also served as a school counselor, a high school counselor, an early childhood counselor, and an elementary counselor. So I have that kind of trauma-informed background and kind of approach things in that way. So I'm glad we can talk about it. So here's just a simple sentence about the agenda. We'll explore the ways in which trauma impacts learning and how educators can mitigate the negative impacts on their students. Okay, so the first thing I would like to do is just do some reflection and get our brains kind of primed for this. So you're here, you obviously think it's important. We're spending an ELD check-in time on this. Why do you think that it's important to spend time talking about trauma and trauma-informed care when we're teachers? So in an academic setting, would you just put that in the chat? Mhm. Right. Students bring their whole selves with them to school, don't they? Even the negative traumatic impact. Yep. Yes. Background impacts learning for all of us. Yes, Karen, we are the magicians for all things EL, really, right? No matter what they're going through, whether they speak a language that we're completely unfamiliar with or they're acting in a different way, we're often asked to step in for them. So, yeah. So, there are lots of reasons that we should be talking about trauma and trauma-informed practices in a school setting. Here is research-based why. So, as teachers, as educators, our goal is to take our students to this pinnacle, right? We're thinking about Maslow. We don't want our kids stuck down here worrying about whether they're going to have enough food to eat or whether they have a bed to sleep in. We want them at the self actualization stage. And that's just a fancy word for living up to their full potential. So that's where we're going with students. And we know they can do it. We have faith in them. We're excited to see what the future holds for them. But if they've got these issues that are still taking up space in their brains, such as physiological needs, the basics of food, water, and shelter, safety, can I trust my environment? Can I trust the people around me? Belonging, is this actually for me or am I an imposter here? Until those things are satisfied, self actualization may or may not come. So that's why, as educators, we can't ignore that. That is the foundation for where we're taking our students on this path. Right? So let's spend a little bit of time just defining trauma. Trauma is a word from Greek etymology, which means wound, which is very general. And we do tend to use trauma in a very generalized way. So I like thinking about trauma in terms of the three E's, sometimes called the three E's of trauma. So the three E's are the event that happens, the experience about that event, and then the effect that it has on the individual. So this definition of trauma says individual trauma results from an event, series of events, or a set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically and or emotionally harmful or life-threatening. It has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, and or spiritual well-being. So the effect can be all-encompassing. And that is from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Association definition. So it's interesting when you think about trauma from these three perspectives. If something happened to all of us in a room right now, we would all have a different experience of that event, and it would impact each of us in a different way. And there are lots of factors for that. There are individual factors, there are ways we approach something new or unpredictable. There are physical factors, right? Whether we hear or can't hear, or see or can't see. There are community factors. What are our safety nets in our community? So there are lots of factors for how a person experiences a traumatic event. So the quote at the bottom, let's go back one more again. Yeah, the quote at the bottom from Crisis Prevention Institute says, when a person's exposed to a traumatic or stressful event, how they experience it greatly influences the long-lasting adverse effects of carrying the weight of trauma. So this can impact when we know about families, and we may know that a couple families come from a similar background, but their children seem to be responding to the traumatic background in very different ways. Maybe some of the kids seem to be adjusting really well, and some just seem to be struggling. And you say, what is going on? We just have to keep in mind that the experience of trauma is very, very individualized, and there are lots of factors that go into the long-lasting effects. Okay, so some of the types of trauma, this is not exhaustive, but these may be some that we see in our students. Event trauma would be more isolated, but it's a violent effect. So, for example, my mother remembers her house burning down when she was 3 years old. She doesn't remember the details, but she remembers what it did to her family. That was an event trauma that impacted her for a lot of years. Developmental trauma is what happens to a person from in utero to about 6 years old. So there are events related to the health of the mother, lack of bonding, abuse, potentially nutrition, that you don't necessarily even have concrete memories of, but they impact the neural pathways. Complex trauma would be exposure to multiple traumatic events or repeated events such as bullying. And historical trauma, also known as multi-generational trauma, also known as collective group trauma, is experienced by a specific cultural, racial, or ethnic group because of their status as oppressed. So, as an example, I have a picture of Native American children who were taken out of their communities and sent to white schools. Their names were changed, their hair was cut, and they basically were stripped of any Native American identity. So that resulted in historical trauma for them. Okay. So you may be familiar with this term. It's been studied for 30, 40 years now, but ACEs has two acronym definitions, actually: adverse childhood experiences and adverse community environment. Basically, they are events or circumstances that one finds oneself in that negatively impact physical and mental health. So adverse childhood experiences could be abuse in the home, could be drug and alcohol abuse, could be physical abuse, could be neglect, etc. Community kind of experiences could be things like violence in the community, poverty, homelessness, things that are beyond a child's control or a person's control. And so there are those, they're actually quite common. Most people have experienced at least one ACE in their life, but most people have experienced more than one. So we think about that if you look at on the left-hand side with the home, there are ACEs that occur within the home, and those would be your typical adverse childhood experiences, right? Physical, emotional, neglect or abuse, sexual abuse, etc. So we know that some of our students deal with that in their homes. But another layer for a lot of our ELs and our immigrants and a lot of our refugees is this migration journey. And the migration journey can take a lot of different, they can take on a lot of different characteristics. They can vary widely, right, depending on who your ELs are. But it's important to think about that as advocates for our English learners, right? So some ACEs that may occur in the pre-migration would be your push factors. What pushed these families out of their homes? And typically, it is something very traumatic. It could be violence, it could be gang violence, it could be governmental unrest, it could be war, it could be death of a family member. So those are the push factors. So those are those traumatic events that push families towards migration. The migration journey can also be very, very unpredictable, stressful, deadly, etc. There may be severe deprivation of basic necessities. So that migration journey can be super negatively impactful. And then post-migration, so that's when they've arrived in a US city, have arrived at your school, but they may still be experiencing something like homelessness or poverty or discrimination. So again, there are, multiple layers as we're dealing with immigrants who have arrived here recently, especially. But that last sentence on the blue graphic there, I think is really important. Parental stress and trauma from migration can increase the risk of ACEs occurring within the family during and after migration. So while our focus is on children, they are severely impacted by their parents' mental health. So our awareness of that and our just kindness and hopefulness with parents is going to impact the children's mental health. And it's really important to remember that when we get frustrated with parents who are just kind of losing it sometimes. I added these two books in the corner. They are both kind of written from that firsthand experience of children migrating to the US, and they both do take place from the southern border into the US. So there would be some others that would be from other places, but these helped me to understand the migration journey. So I just wanted to share those with you. Okay, so we talked about the trauma layers, we talked about the migration journey, and there are multiple behaviors that we can see that can be trauma responses. And they can be in the areas of physical responses, cognitive responses, social and emotional responses, language, and learning. So I just want to point out one or two in each category. So in the physical category, some behaviors we may see are increased somatic complaints. So those are issues in the body. There are frequent comments about headaches and stomach aches. Those can contribute to students missing a lot of school. I know I moved from one country to another in fifth grade and went to the nurse on a regular basis saying that I had a stomach ache because I was stressed out. And so when a student is experiencing regular somatic complaints, it may be an opportunity to talk to the student about some coping strategies, some breathing, maybe talk to the school counselor about a safe space they could go to at certain stressful times and things like that. Cognitive behaviors that we see is worry and fear, and just dissociation. So this may be the kid with the hoodie on and his head on the desk because life is just too much, a little dissociative. It's just a brain break that they need. So again, offering an opportunity for a student to take a break, to doodle, to walk outside, little things that help the brain take a break. Social and emotional, kind of the range of emotions. You may see extreme aggression and you may see extreme withdrawal. If you see those extremes, it's always helpful. And if you have a good school counselor, you are team up with that person and ask if they can help just do some things that draw a person out and draw the emotions out. What is the underlying cause of those big feelings? Language. Hey, our job is to teach language, but guess what? Stress slows down our ability to develop language. So I know when I'm stressed out or I'm angry, it's hard to find the words to express myself. So again, if we can combine language with movement, or language with music, or language with peer interaction, where students get to talk it out, it helps to just soften those walls of stress that come up when a student is giving a trauma response. And finally, learning. So for educators, we may see a lot of absenteeism when students are stressed out. And honestly, if the parents are stressed out, they're not going to fight it. They're going to be like, okay, fine. So if you do have students who have a lot of absenteeism, really try to make a connection. Try to connect and find out, can I help? Can you just share with me what this might be? Difficulties with authority, difficulties listening, difficulties with memory. So again, combining things that help the brain to de-stress with learning can help break down some of that traumatic responses. All right. Okay. So let's take 1 second and put in the chat, what types of trauma response behaviors have you observed in your students and in your setting? Mhm. Yeah. Anger, kind of reacting. Yes, perfectionism for sure. Fear of doing the wrong thing. Self-harm. Staying silent. Wow. Okay, we may be seeing that in students. Frequent bathroom breaks. Yes. Ugh, and dropping out. That's that's horrible. Yes, we may be seeing these responses from students. We may also be seeing those responses from staff, right? We all have our own ways of coping also. And staff needs it too. Staff needs a break. And staff needs to be able to take a walk outside sometimes too. So yes, okay, so we're seeing the results potentially of just the overwhelm of trauma, whether a student can even express it or not. We want to mitigate that, which just means to reduce it as much as we can. And they spend a lot of time with us. We have some amount of power in that. Okay, and we'll talk about some more specific things. All right, so I know in our very limited time, a video is not always great, but this video is it truly changed how I see students who are in what we call survival brain. So when we think about trauma, it not only is something that happens externally, it happens internally and it happens to our brains. So I think it's important to watch this so that we can compare what a learning brain, meaning student behavior, would look like versus a child who is in trauma and trying to survive. There's no sound.
Brain versus a brain in survival mode. So we'll just call it learning brain versus survival brain. And this is the difference. So learning brain is this brain that's open to learning new information, and it's completely okay with ambiguity and grays and vagueness, and it sees the big picture. It like pulls back and is on the balcony, can look over the forest and figure out what's going on. On an emotional level, people in learning brain feel calm, peaceful, maybe a little excited about what they're about to learn, maybe a little playful and having fun too, and definitely curious. And they're not afraid of making mistakes because it's just part of the learning process. And so they're not really thinking about themselves. And they actually feel a little bit of confidence that if they just apply themselves, they might pick up what they're trying to learn. Now, survival brain, on the other hand, is completely different. It's hyper-focused on threat. It doesn't like ambiguity. It wants clear, hard facts. It thinks in black and white terms. It doesn't want anything to be gray at all. And then emotionally, you can imagine that survival brain makes people feel panicky, feel like a little obsessive and afraid of getting things wrong. And they don't feel calm and open to learning new things. They just want to get things over with. And people in survival brain also really don't like making mistakes, and they are afraid of looking stupid too. So students in survival brain don't want to be picked on. They don't want to raise their hand and ask questions and look stupid. And so these people are also filled with doubt about their own ability to learn stuff, and they're afraid that other people can see how stupid they really are. Now, it's really important to understand how learning brain and survival brain interact, because survival brain always trumps learning brain. And it makes sense because survival brain is just trying to save your life. And so if it thinks that there's something dangerous happening, you better pay attention to it, right? But the tricky thing is that as survival brain stays on longer and longer, it's harder to get out of that. And it's harder to really go into learning brain. And the way I think about it is kind of like the myth of Sisyphus. You know, that guy who has to push a rock up a hill, and then every day it falls back down and he has to do it over and over again. Well, being in learning brain is like being up on the high parts of that mountain. You can see the expanse of what's going on, but it also takes a lot of work to be up there. And at any second, if you're not paying attention and putting effort into it, it's so easy to slip back into survival brain again. And that rock that Sisyphus is trying to push up, well, that's kind of like stress. And the more stressed you feel, the heavier and bigger that rock gets, and it just pushes you back into survival brain quicker. Now, the kicker is that for traumatized people, stress is a really rigid and intense thing. And so with trauma, any little stress makes that rock grow way bigger than it normally would. And because people with trauma misperceive ambiguous situations as threatening and stressful, that rock just stays big all the time. Now, the good news is that the more you control stress, well, the easier it is to be in learning brain, right? Because that rock is a lot smaller. And what I really want to highlight for teachers is that the best way to keep students in learning brain goes back to why I spent so much time talking about attachment. Students best learn when they feel like they're safe and supported by the adults around them. So it's kind of like a baby elephant. You know how like on those nature shows, the baby elephant is like playing with leaves or exploring a tree or something like that and having a lot of fun. And the only reason why they can do that is because there's a whole group of mama elephants around that baby protecting it and looking out for danger. So a kid with trauma or who's stuck in survival brain, it's kind of like that baby elephant who doesn't have protective adults around them. They can't play and learn because they're way too focused looking out for threat and danger. So this is why I really believe that the most important thing that schools need to focus on, way more important than any kind of techniques or curricula, is really whether or not they are creating that environment where students feel like they're surrounded by these big mama elephants who are going to protect them and watch out for them and make them safe. And when students have that, I bet you it unlocks their curiosity, their eagerness to learn, and play as a way to learn.
All right. So, anybody feel like Sisyphus sometimes pushing that rock up the mountain? So who are the mama elephants in your school, in your setting? Well, we are the mama and dada elephants, right? That's us who can surround a child or a young person with love and care so that they can lean toward the learning brain and get out of the survival brain.
A learning brain versus
Hello, hold on. Okay. So that leads us to trauma-informed care. What is trauma-informed care? Well, it is meant to be a universal framework of care and awareness of how stress and trauma impacts everybody. It doesn't just impact students, right? It impacts staff, it impacts the families, it impacts all of us in a school setting. So, trauma informed care is a systematic way of recognizing some things that can be attributed to trauma and making an environment that is safe and caring so that students can learn. So, the first thing, and this goes back to the video we just watched, is the power of connection, or he sometimes says, what was the word? Attachment, right? And that ideally is starting from childhood at home. However, we know it doesn't always happen that way, but we have a lot of power. Students connect to teachers. Teachers can save lives. So this is just a couple little takeaways from this 3-video series called Stress, Trauma, and the Brain, Insights for Educators. It is excellent, and I highly recommend that you watch it. They're not very long, but Dr. Bruce Perry is the main narrator. He has written several books on attachment and trauma. He wrote a book a couple years ago with Oprah Winfrey called What Happened to You. It was incredible insights. So I love this quote. It's not what you know, it's how you are. So we all carry this way of being with us, right? We all have this either warmth or distance. And especially language learners can pick up on it in an instant. When they don't have words to figure out what's being said, they watch your body, they listen to your tone, they look at your proximity. They know who they're safe with and who they're not. So, quick little story. I was talking to a friend who is a liaison in a school in a large district. She was called to a building because a student was acting out. This is a kindergartner, was eloping from the classroom. And she was called in. Now, she is a Spanish speaker. And so I asked, she said, so I connected with the kid and helped calm him down. I said, is he a Spanish speaker? She said, no, he speaks a tribal language from Africa. It doesn't matter. She said, we spoke the language of love. And I just went, wow, that kid doesn't need words to know that he's safe with her. So what are we communicating to kids? Connection regulates the nervous system, which makes students feel safer. So I love this quote, my calm calms you. So if that means we take 1,000 deep breaths a day, we do that to calm ourselves so that when we approach a student who is angry, who is withdrawn, who is whatever, we are calm and we share that calm with them. Connection takes milliseconds. It's a look, it's a wave, it's a smile, it's saying someone's name, it's touching a shoulder. All of that is connection. And what connection does is calm, open the frontal cortex for learning. Also, students are watching us. They watch how we treat other students who are in distress. And they know whether they can trust us or not to help them when they're in distress. So we're teaching them, when they watch us, we're teaching them how we would treat them if they were doing those things. We're also teaching them how to treat other students who are doing those things. So our example and our connection is essential. And again, just to repeat, language learners are adept at reading body language. So what is your body communicating? Most of communication is nonverbal, and we are not aware of our own nonverbal communication. All right, so what are some practices, intentional practices we can implement that nurture safety and belonging? And we're just going to go right through these. So the first is to maintain a safe and predictable environment. So outside of connection's number one. Consistency is number two. Being in a consistent environment helps to regulate the nervous system also. Unpredictability just blows up our cortisol in our nervous system. So keep a calm demeanor, deep breaths. If that means Starbucks, if that means chocolate, whatever it takes to keep calm. That's what we need to do. Say our students' names correctly. Connection is saying my name. I feel special if you remember my name, and especially if you say it correctly. And teach classmates to say each other's names correctly. Model positive communication skills. If I want my students to say please and thank you, I'm saying please and thank you. Address conflict and disciplinary issues immediately and fairly. Disruption is extremely stressful, and you can see trauma responses when an environment is rowdy or out of control. And then keep a daily routine. Predictability equals safety. I feel that myself. I need to know what's happening in my day, or I feel like discombobulated, like today when my electricity went off 30 minutes before this thing and I had to come to the library. Build relationships. Be willing to be vulnerable and make mistakes with humor. You got to laugh at yourself. There's got to be that model that mistakes happen. Build relationships and classroom community. Buddy up. So yes, students come to school to learn, but they also come to school to be with their friends. And our kids need friends. That they learn so much from each other. Teach and model growth mindset. We are all learning. I'm a teacher and I'm learning from you. Let's learn a new phrase in Japanese today. Oh, I sound hilarious when I say that. So those kind of vulnerable moments are really important for relationship building. Incorporate frequent pair and small group work. Connect in other ways besides just academic. We do that a lot in elementary, but once students get a little bit older, we're all business. So remember, mention soccer, mention Bad Bunny, mention, musicians and things that they can relate to. And then help students get to know other adults in the building. That gives them some self-efficacy and empowers them to take care of their problems. If they know where the nurse is and what the nurse does, who to ask about lunch questions, who to ask about the bus, that empowers a student and makes them feel like they belong. Teach self-awareness and self-regulation. In a lot of cultures, there are no social emotional words. We don't talk about depression and bipolar and stress. We talk about a headache or weakness or gas or a stomach ache. Those kind of psychological terms are actually somatic terms in some cultures. So we have to teach the awareness of what it feels like to be angry, what that emotion is, what the names of the emotions are, how to identify them when they come up in your body. That's really important for all students, but especially for students from cultures where they don't talk about it. Model breathing and tools for self-calming. Incorporate art, music, movement. If you're putting students on an assignment, put on some music that corresponds to whatever the assignment happens to be. Allow students to take a break. And can I just say, drink water? Because when our brains are dehydrated, it messes us up. It messes up with our moods and it messes up our cognitive function. So you stay hydrated, make sure your students are staying hydrated. And then create a calm space for students in distress. That could be in your classroom. You can partner with your school counselor, you can partner with your behavioral specialist and create some place students can go when they are in distress. Increase visibility. Look around your building or your classroom and say, do my students see representations from their country, kids that look like them, maybe signage in other languages? What artifacts are familiar to students in their view? You can take this language representation inventory. It's really interesting to evaluate how your setting is doing. Enrich your library with authors and topics that are multicultural. You know the saying of windows, so we're learning how people live differently from us, and mirrors, which is that there's someone in that story that looks like me or that I'm reflected in that story. Okay. Provide translations for building signage that helps parents feel like they belong, showcase student work, and celebrate languages. So this is our friend Carly Spina. She puts this sign up outside her classroom that says, in this room, we have 14 languages, and then she lists the languages that are spoken. All right, so as we mentioned before, the mental health of the parent directly impacts the mental health of a student. So, for parents and caregivers, we can notice if they seem to be stressed or traumatized and offer coping strategies, offer a bottle of water. When you know a parent's coming in and they're looking like they've got some fire in the eyes, you take them a bottle of water or a glass of water and start out with that. You drink some and offer them to drink some because parents are stressed out. And so we want them to have some strategies to calm. And you can teach your kids strategies like smell the flower, blow out the candle, and say, that's something you could teach to mom and dad tonight. So they can take some of their learning home. Address the hesitancy and distrust of physical and mental health providers. So introduce your families to the nurse and tell what she does. Introduce your families to the school counselor and tell what she does. In those beginning of the year parent meetings, those health and physical and mental health professionals need to be present so parents know that they are safe people. You can also help parents understand U.S. norms of family and child rearing. BRICS has some excellent resources and give parents, equip parents with information about the school. Okay, before we end, I want to talk about resilience because having ACEs, coming from a traumatic background, having a dangerous migration story is not the end of the story. Resilience happens, resilience is common, and it should be talked about. So, resilience is the ability to overcome and recover from experiences such as ACEs. So, talk about it with students. Talk about how amazingly resilient they are. The fact that they're sitting in your classroom is like overcoming so many scary things. And so, talking about resilience and grit and overcoming and reminding students what they've already overcome is really important. It's empowering for them. And then I've included some factors that contribute to resilience. All right, so the last thing is what is one trauma-informed practice that you would like to implement to increase a sense of safety and belonging in your building and our classroom? And or if you already have one that you regularly implement, we'd love to hear that too. Yes, breathing. I mean, hello, practical. You can do that anywhere. And there's a million different fun ones you can do, and kids can make up their own. Yes, let students be teachers. That is super empowering. Yes, we all need a break. I mean, something like a brain break, if your class is struggling, you stop, you turn on some music, you let everybody dance for 5 minutes, and it will change the remainder of your class. All right. And I just want to finish with this slide. I know what it's like to feel overwhelmed by the stories in your classroom. And that experience is called secondary trauma or vicarious trauma, where we carry the weight of what we know about our students and their trauma with us. So sometimes it feels like, what good am I even doing? This is so much. But when you feel overwhelmed, remember, there is power in your presence and compassion. There's not a magic tool. There's not something that's going to make it all better. We can't fix everything, but we can bear witness. And that's what people need. They need listeners who care about them. And finally, that our kindness offers hope. Thank you. And I do have a couple slides here with other resources that you can explore if you want to do that. All right, Cami, I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Rhonda. That was great. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again, and we'll try to finish this out. So she gave us several systems of support that we can put in place, and those are wonderful. But our teachers also need some of those systems of support. So I had teacher that I used to teach with sent me this picture, and she said she feels like she should wear this to school every day. And I frequently hear EL specialists say that on their campus, they feel less valued as a team member, as an educator, as a department. And also, they're assigned other duties other than what they should be doing, like monitoring lunchroom, or a teacher doesn't show up and you're asked to take their class until a sub can be found. So a lot of times we feel like we are less when we should be feeling like we are more. Many specialists aren't able to attend planning with the general ed teachers, or they're omitted from RTI or IEP. So we need to make sure that they're included, because we tend to go along with it just because we don't want to feel the tension or cause disruption. But if your staff view EL specialists or the EL team negatively or as less important, it creates negative effects on the students, and nobody wants that, because they all deserve what's best from all of us. We don't want to feel like the overpaid paraprofessional. And so a lot of us, we feel this inward cry across social media and blogs and late phone calls that I get at night. I hear people saying they just don't understand what we do. And this misunderstanding leads to those misconceptions and reputations that are unwarranted. So what do we do? Well, it goes back kind of to that advocacy. How are we going to change it? We have to look at ourselves, identify our beliefs about teaching English learners. If you work as a team, do that together as your team and build that support group and list your beliefs and your goals. How do you feel about English learners and teaching English learners? What do you think your team should be like? What are your goals for your school? What can you do to help achieve those goals? What's within your circle of influence to get done? And what would you like to change about the way you or your team is perceived? Another thing is use your beliefs and work together to create a mission statement. Keep it short, like any mission statement should be 1 or 2 sentences. But what is it that you want to do? And write it down. And it could look like one of these examples here. The next thing is, once you've determined what your belief in your mission is, decide on what are the non-negotiables, what are critical roles and responsibilities that you have to have come into play for this to come to life. Whether it's planning with the mainstream teachers, being able to go to professional development, how you get to serve more time with your newcomers because they need more of your time rather than just a set schedule all day long. Having some flexibility. Those are some important things to get down. And then this one is critical. Secure a meeting with your campus administration to talk about your vision, because you need their support and you need them to see what expertise you bring to the table. And as the small print says, you also have to keep in mind that in the end, they are your boss and what they say goes. But using a positive mindset when you approach them, and putting kids first helps to give them the idea of how you need to be supported. So a goal that I have for us is that we change the face of English language development. No more people saying, well, they're your kids, go fix them. That's the scariest thing we can do because they're all of our kids. We don't want to relegate it to someone else's responsibility. And foremost, our kids don't need to be fixed. Their needs need to be addressed. And when everyone understands this and works together, we can improve the education for our students because what we all do affects the child. As Rhonda said, it could be either good or bad. If we come with the right mindset, it's going to be better for them. So another thing I'd like to see is us to showcase what works. So if you have something that's really working in your schools, we want to make it known. We want people to see it because we want them to see the impact that EL teachers are making for their students in their schools. So if there's something that's going on, please let me know. Our EL specialists should be seen as leaders in the districts. They know how to connect to parents. They know how to communicate. They need to be empowered to be the teachers that can help when the other teacher is saying, well, your student's being lazy and they don't do anything in class. I hear them talking outside, so I know they can speak English. So why aren't they performing like that in my classroom? We need to be able to address those and be the person they can go to and talk to about those things because our kids deserve it. So I encourage you to develop an elevator speech. A lot of us have to do this or address this when we go for an interview at a job, but it's good to have in your pocket whenever you talk to people about what your job is, because they need to know what we do and how important our job is and the expertise that we bring to the table. So in developing an elevator speech, consider ways in which you collaborate, how you serve as a leader, how you support your students and their parents, turn your ideas into a few talking points, then go from there and turn those talking points into a 30-second elevator speech that you can give whenever someone brings up the topic of English language learners, and practice it with a friend so you're ready. And then reflect upon it and revise it as needed when you're talking to other individuals. So, how's your vision? I hope it's becoming clearer. And I hope you understand that it starts with you, but you know that your MEL specialist and I are going to do the best we can to support and advocate for you as well as your students. I have a box of chocolates here. And Rhonda was talking, I was thinking, yeah, I think I've gotten into this more than I should lately, but I'd share it all with you guys if I had it and saw you in person, because I think we all could use some support every now and then, even if it's just chocolate. So this last slide that I have are those resources I was talking to you about, some things that talk about the law and regulations in our state, things you can put in your back pocket that you can use to solidify why we are important, and the rules and regulations behind what we do. And then there's always, for your support, our MEL specialist and myself as well. So we hope that you call on us when you need us. And we're fortunate to have educators like you. And thank you for being here today. You can always contact me, and I have that thank you slide as well. And that's all I have to share today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oops. There we go. And if there are any questions that you have before we call it a day.
I have a question if no one else does.
Certainly.
Okay. I have a group of kiddos that I call them my COVID kids, because with me teaching English and reading at the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade level, my kids tend to test out. They come in 4th grade. Most often they all test out. The ones that have been here less time, it may take them a couple more years, but I have a group of kids that we have had since kindergarten. It's the first time, I guess, I've really acknowledged having long-term English learners. But whenever I work with them at the high school level, I choose to use what's Pride Time. It's about 25 minutes, and I have to share it with announcements, but I usually have something set up for them. I teach Mondays and Wednesdays, and I give them Tuesdays and Thursdays for me to either bring in tutors to work with them on subjects, or they get passes to go to other classes that they need to work on. My principal has been inundated with requests to be out of that. Well, the only other recourse is I now have independent study and can work with students that are extremely low. So their choice is to give up a class and be with me, and they'll test out, because that's the success of my middle school, is they are getting 2 full sessions of classes, and it focuses on reading and English. I just, I really, I know you say elevator speeches, and I have given my elevator speech to them why you're here. I have rebutted. I did not take the test. So whenever you ask me why you're still here and why didn't I let you out, it's not about me, it's about you. And I keep going over the 4 tenets, those domains that, you're doing well on these two. These are the two that are popping up over and over: writing and speaking. Those are my two that pop up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told him, I said, whenever I do focus on speaking, it does go up. But I really don't think that score is what's keeping you out. It's the writing score. If we can get that writing score up past 4.0 and everything else is good, you will test out. And so I know I had a lot of disappointed kids this year because they didn't test out. And I just want to know how anybody else is dealing with some of these kids in high school. Did you have a large group that was still in because of COVID? Because that's the only thing I can attribute it to. That's the only comparable factor between all of these kids. I've had a few through the years that have tested out from that group, but I have consistently had this core group travel with me. Any suggestions?
Anyone else noticing that in their districts?
Does anyone have long-term learners still in their program?
I have a bunch of high schoolers as well. A lot of what I noticed, my group, it was just, I think they're 10th graders this year. And I don't know what was happening in the district at the time, but a lot of them are also IEP students.
Mm-hmm.
So not only are they EL, but they're SPED too. And so now they're sophomores, so they're always asking that same question. Why are they still doing it? Why are they, and then it gets to the point where they don't try to do the access anymore. And so I try really hard at the beginning of the school year just to come up with some goals and maybe come up with ways that they're going to. I show them how they've progressed for the last 3 years, and I actually give them a visual, like a bar graph, so they see it where they're growing. And so this year, my approach I tried was they came up with how they're going to do it, different ways of how they're going to do better on the reading. Um, that way, it lays on them to actually do it instead of me telling them what they need to do. So that's what I've tried.
Thank you. I love that.
That was actually going to be my suggestion, because with my students, when they were stuck like that, we set goals together and they actually tracked them in a notebook. So that became part of their portfolio. And then I had that portfolio evidence too when it came assessment time, that I might be able to exit them by portfolio, even if they didn't test well, and I let them know that as well. We've gathered this evidence as we've gone along, and you've shown me you can do this. So I expect it on the test, but if you don't on the test, we've already gathered this evidence. So that will help us. If you don't quite get there, we could exit you by using this information as well. Mm-hmm. So putting them in charge of it and making them help chart it as we go along.
Well, I had one just today send the principal who does the scheduling for Pride, um, sent her an email and said, now, if I get out of Pride this year from the ELL Pride, can I have another female teacher? I don't want a male teacher. I mean, and this was so random, but I knew the underlying message. She was, am I going to get out? And the thing is we don't even get the scores until June. She's going to be in, but I have always consistently told them once we get past the third quarter, that second half of second semester, I don't care where you go for Pride. I will still be here. I will have somebody in my class and I will be here, and you can just use my Pride passes to come see me if you need to. Because once we're post test, it's almost lame duck season. So I do let them do that. But this is, first quarter. So that seems like an eon away.
Karen, I was going to ask too. So exactly what Susie said, exactly what Cami said, set goals so that they have the responsibility and they know it's on them. But I'm also curious, do you have any kind of ceremony or honor in place for students who do exit the program?
I do. I do. Now, as far as through middle school and junior high, we do, it used to be English Loud and Proud, but now that we have Missouri Seal of Biliteracy, I do give them on the pathway because they can't, in our district, we do not have children who are starting a foreign language in kindergarten. They don't get it until high school. So it's pretty typical of our kids that are fluent. It's because they're taking courses side by side as they're going through school, but they're not doing it until high school.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't earn that pathway award earlier. For the high school, they'll still get on the pathway to biliteracy from me, but it is not the Missouri Seal of Biliteracy. And so that's the goal that I've been, and it's helped a few of my students test out. I had two, well, one had actually tested out way back in third grade, but he stayed with me, not in my ELO class, but he stayed in contact. He was always checking on me, other students. And so I was not surprised whenever he really scored high on his home language.
Mm-hmm.
But I have other students that they want out and they want the Missouri Seal of Biliteracy. However, the strange thing is they're not part of this group. It is that particular group. Some of the students are not fluent, and you know the stats on this. They're not fluent in their own home language. One of them does speak fluently, but does not read or write it. Another one, she cannot read it or write it. She was back in her country for kindergarten, came back to us for first grade, and for the first 2 years that she was with us, it was just constant wanting to put her in SPED. She's not a SPED kid. Finally, one of the process coordinators tested her, and she's like, sometimes we just have to accept that we have C students. They're not all A students, even if they're fluent in another language. And I told her, I said, but the strange thing is my students who are fluent in their language and they're becoming fluent in English, they are A students. And so this is why, I've sat back and tried to look at these kids. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 of them from that group. And now I have a whole family of students, and the younger ones tested out. And I have explained the students, since I've been doing the biliteracy, the home language testing, Arabic and Turkey. I said, one of the things that I have noticed, even though I don't even know what they're saying or how they're answering, I can tell you right now, my students stayed for 2 hours on that writing test. It tells you that it's an hour and 20 minutes. They stayed 2 hours just to do the writing. I mean, they were flying high.
That's
And
great.
so then I had another student, whenever uh, he was taking the test, I observed that he pushed back, and he was literally, I'd see him on his fingers and he was talking to the air. He was practicing what he was going to say before he said it. And I told him, I said, so I got to digging into this, and I told him, I said, up through 8th grade, that WIDA test is what you have been accustomed to. Once we crossed into high school, you're taking AP English test is what you're taking. And if you don't treat it like these kids are taking AP French or AP German or Chinese, then you're not treating this test with the respect that they see it as. And they're my kids that are testing out of the program, and they're testing with flying colors in their home language, and of course receiving the Missouri Seal of Biliteracy. And I think that was the test that opened my eyes to it. So that's why this year I upped my game, and that could be why they're complaining more. I really am teaching. The first writing prompt was to write an analytical response. And I told him, I said, these are words that you should know, you're hearing them, but you need to put them into action. And I even told them on the first writing prompt, if you can master this prompt, you can master the writing on the WIDA.
Yeah.
And the prompt, even though I didn't know what the kids were writing to, whenever I started doing research into some of the other languages and just getting an idea, it was coming back with academic language that we use in English, but it was in their language.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, maybe I need to give them a little bit harder writing prompts. But like I said, I am getting pushback, and I understand that. But I mean, maybe I'm on the right course with them and I'm not overdoing it because I'm not teaching all 4 days. And I still follow the same format whenever I'm gone. The sub that's there is our ELL para, and I tell her, don't force them to do anything on Tuesday and Thursday, but make sure they're respectful, staying in their seat, working on their work. But ever since they opened up the independent study class, it's a comm arts class, so I am working on the same things but at a lower level. Those kids are flying high with their writing, and I'm like, what bridge do I need to build to these kids? But I like what you said, both of you, Cammie and Rhonda, putting them to create their own goals. And I think you said that too, Susie. Have them sit down and create their own goals. I can supply them with all their test scores last year and the year before, and just ask them where they see themselves this year and what they need to do in order to get there. But
also, Karen,
yes.
do you use the Missouri Connections database? Your school counselors might use it. School counselors, I think, are required to, but you can get a login for MissouriConnections.org. It's also available in Spanish, but it allows students to explore careers and educational pathways, and they can look at, how much the degree would cost, how much money it
I
makes.
remember this. That's how they plan coursework.
Yes, but you can get one so that you can do lessons that show, if your goal is to be an attorney, here are the steps required, here are the kind of skills you need to have that kind of job, just to get them thinking past high school. I feel like this is where kids get stuck in middle and high school. They're like, this is all there is, and I hate it, and I'm going to show how bad I am by not caring. But if they think past high school, and start thinking about their life afterwards, then they have to connect it to now. Oh my gosh, if I want that job, I'm gonna have to be really good at writing, so I maybe could get it in gear now. Do you know what I mean? So Missouri Connections might be a good, and it's fun. It's fun for them to explore careers.
Okay.
I'm glad you said that because I know Julie's actually had a presentation on that, and then sometimes you just forget stuff.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And then
I do feel like I repeat, but you need repetition sometimes.
Yeah. And another thing I want to tell you, Karen, is sometimes somebody told me this one day, and I try not to say when my students come to me, they say, "Did I pass the test?" I try to not to say, you don't pass the test, you level up. So I don't want them to feel like they're failing at something. So I'm
Mhm.
trying to be better also about not using that or even saying, "Oh, you didn't pass," because then that just
Mhm.
feel like they're just not
Well,
doing
this
so.
poor group, they have 2 weeks at the beginning of school of academic um, advisory. And so they don't even see me for the first 2 weeks. They don't even know that they're going to still be in. And this year, this was this is my year for the record. I had 10 new kids, all limited English from middle school through high school. 3 of them were at high school.
Wow.
And so I didn't even have to ask. Counselors came to me and said, we need to find out what your credentials are and see what matches a class so we can get you here. And it wasn't so much about my credentials. I knew I had that, but it was a time factor. So I literally gave up lunch so I could teach this class or
Mhm.
half of my plan period, however you want to look at it. But whenever I knew once they got there, so I did send out kind of a softening. I'll see you in Pride on Monday. I'm looking forward to it. So that softened the blow a little bit. But one of the things that I did say, uh, we had given all their test scores out at open houses. And for those few that didn't, a parent wasn't there, we handed them to the students as they came in for Pride. And I told them, I said, you're adults. You want to look at your scores, just make sure you tape it back up and take it home to mom and dad. You can see your scores. And I did tell them everybody did go up. All areas, all students. I never thought of using the word level. That is a game term.
I like that one.
Mhm.
Yes, leveling
Yeah.
up.
Well, and
So I
I,
need to tell them if they want to get to the level, get to the final level
yeah,
of when they're out. Yes, maybe I just need to think
Make
in
it
that.
gaming terms.
yes,
Gaming
Yes,
terms.
yes,
yes.
absolutely.
Well, and I
And
have a chart.
even myself,
Yeah.
the only game that I really play um, is Pokemon Go. My whole family plays Pokemon Go. And I tell my husband, because my husband's retired, I will come in, he'll tell me how many hundos he got and how many shiny. I don't have enough time in my day,
Mm.
nor do I have the desire, but I do want to level up and I will make it work within the framework of my day and feel good about what I'm doing. So now I need
Mhm.
to turn around and put that in terminology for my kids. Give me some points on how can I get these kids to understand? Please stop emailing the principals requesting help and saying it in a way where they understand, I love them. I know you get tired of me, but we've got goals here. Let's set some goals. Or maybe I should ask them to set goals that if they can answer that writing prompt.
So you might say, the principal is a very busy person. Maybe we should work together to advocate for change. If you want to see a change, all of you get together and help write one letter.
Oh,
Ooh, a joint writing
There you
project.
go.
That's
yes.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like
Well,
that
thank you
idea.
so much. I hope that you have electricity whenever you go home.
So do
I
I.
know. Me too, because otherwise I can't get in my garage.